Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a virtual training webinar hosted by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, and their Strategic Outreach and Communications Program. Please note, all participants will remain muted for the duration of the session. If you experience any connectivity issues while logged in, we suggest disconnecting and logging in again. If that does not resolve your issue, please use the WebEx dial-in and access code to rejoin the session. This session will be recorded. A copy of the presentation and a link to view the recording will be made available to you within 48 hours. Please take a moment to find both the Q&A panel and the chat window located on the lower right side of your screen. Use the Q&A panel to type in your questions for the panelists and use the chat feature for brief networking, introductions, and kudos. Please note, participation of any commercial entities in VA outreach and training programs does not convey or imply that the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs directly or indirectly endorses any product or service provided or to be provided by the commercial entity, its successors, assignees, or licensees. Furthermore, the Department of Veterans Affairs does not warrant any services that may be provided by the commercial organizations listed. At the conclusion of today's event, you will be prompted to complete a brief survey. We greatly appreciate your feedback. Before we begin, we welcome Ms. Anastasia Avetta-Lewis, Contract Team Lead of the Direct Access Program, who will provide opening remarks on behalf of VA OSDBU. Ms. Lewis, welcome.
Thank you, Jessica. Greetings and good afternoon from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. On behalf of our leadership, we thank you for your participation in today's virtual training webinar. VA OSDBU remains committed to employing innovative methods to promptly inform you about relevant procurement opportunities, training, and information. Virtual events we conduct would not be possible without the support of industry partners. Before we begin, I would like to welcome our host from Uninet Proposal AI, Mr. Sasha Jackson, Senior Solutions Specialist. Strategic Outreach and Communications is dedicated to small business readiness through programs, outreach events, and educational and training. We routinely conduct a variety of engaging online events designed to facilitate meaningful interactions and foster relationships. We encourage all to continue to visit our website to stay updated on upcoming events and valuable opportunities to connect and collaborate. We extend our thanks to everyone who supports the department in its mission to serve our nation's veterans. Mr. Jackson, you may begin.
Great. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for making time for the webinar discussion today. I know we're all trying to find more time in the day for everything that we have on our plates, so I hope to reward the attendance today by giving you guys some tips and tricks for improving your ability to leverage commercially available conversational AI chatbots to make your proposal process more streamlined and efficient. And to be clear, what I'm going to be speaking to today are your interaction with those large commercial conversational chatbots. People refer to them as different things, but your ChatGPTs, your Anthropic's Claude, your Google Gemini, and the other major available tools that you might have experimented with either in a professional context or in a personal context. And the reason I make that distinction is because there are a host of more tailored AI tools that have come to market in the past several years that are domain specific with regard to the federal contracting and proposal submission process. But the user experience will vary on those most likely given different UIs and features. Not to say that what we're talking about today can't be relevant on that, but I'm going to try to stay at least at a little higher level within an interface you might be a bit more familiar with. So that's a nice little segue into my background. I am a senior solution specialist. I think they gave me the name that's hardest to say quickly at Uninet's Proposal AI product. Uninet, if you're not familiar, is a service provider for GovCons with tools that help across the procurement lifecycle. I was a founding sales executive at GovPro AI, which was the company that Uninet acquired last November. And I was there starting about a year plus ago, but have been in and around the AI and government contracting space for about 3 years since I left federal service at the Treasury Department, and have been exploring ways to apply generative AI to the procurement process to try to find time savings and efficiencies relative to the current, which is often a much more manual process. And I remember having conversations with executives in this space in late 2022, which, if you might remember, was when OpenAI released its ChatGPT tool, and really it got into the public consciousness that there was this powerful new generative artificial intelligence product out there. When I was having those conversations several years ago, really there was a lack of familiarity with it. And it's been interesting to watch over several years working at startups in this space, how that has gotten into the water, and we've gone from a level of unfamiliarity to amazement first time you've played around with one of those tools, to concern and trepidation of what is this going to do? Is this going to disrupt my job? Is this going to take my data? To where we are now, which is, I think, a higher level of curiosity and interest, and really moving into an adoption phase. We have seen the increase in customer onboardings go up quite a bit just in the past 6 months, which to me is a signal that there is real interest in how companies can apply this, both from a little bit more of an ad hoc approach with some of these commercial AI tools, but also at a more enterprise level. So what are we going to talk about today? Very quickly, I want to level set on what the pain points that we all experience in the proposal process. And then I want to spend the most time on what are the techniques that you can use to get more out of this nascent technology with regard to building out a response and shredding a solicitation that you might be going after. We'll go through a couple of case studies, talk through a few examples, and then I want to briefly touch on security considerations. I know that's top of mind. That's probably the question that I get most often is my data safe? How can I make sure that my IP isn't leaking out and becoming part of a foundational model to help my competitor improve their process? So that's a good question. And then I want to leave ample time for questions. My experience is that you've all been experimenting with this in some capacity. And so to the extent that I can be helpful answering questions on specific cases, then I'm glad to discuss that. And then hopefully we can end a few minutes early. I've never attended a presentation that I was upset when I got a few minutes back. Like I said, I know we're all busy, so let's jump right in. So maybe first, just in terms of where we are, to say that it's been an interesting few months in this space is probably the understatement of the year. We have had the budget showdown, we've had the change in administration, we've had the DOGE efforts to go after spending. I think they set a target at over $1 trillion in discretionary spending. We've had legal action on some of the contracts that have been terminated. But if you can step back from the day-to-day news and think about where we are in the last couple of quarters of the fiscal year, agencies have a lot of money to obligate that they haven't obligated, in some part due to the disruption that we've had the last several months. So we are gearing up for, on our side, as we talk to GovCons, a very, very busy rest of Q3 and Q4. And so one of the operative questions to think about, and probably why we have so many people on this call, is how can I leverage technology to be able to hit my growth targets and to get to the number of good fit opportunities that I need to or want to before those funds are obligated on September 30th. Okay, proposals. We know that proposals are how you guys are making money, right? You're the way you put your content into a document, combined obviously with your past performance and other key features, that the words on the page are worth money. And the process that you're going through today, as we've stylized here on the screen, takes time to get those words in the right order, the right structure, and then respond to that RFP. What we've done in each one of these steps here is itemize a few pain points. These should look familiar. We hear about them all the time. Now, how long does it take you to go from getting the solicitation or the RFI or whatever document you're responding to a good pink team quality draft where you have outline, narrative text, and a compliance mapping? And the average time we hear for an RFI is 3 to 5 hours. And for a simple RFP, 30 to 50 hours. Maybe we handicap that as a week, and hopefully that's 5 days if you're working normal people hours. But as we all know, sometimes you're jamming way into the night or over a weekend to try to get those done.
Mr. Jackson, I think we lost volume. We lost your sound. Please hold. We lost your sound. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Please hold, everyone. Please hold for a technical check.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's continue. Apologize. Let me just close out the slide. Presumably you're following along visually, even if you couldn't hear me. But we talked to a lot of GovCons who are looking at the AI landscape warily with the operating assumption that AI is fallible. You've experienced or heard about AI hallucinating or making up content or missing certain items. And we think that some of that can be addressed with better prompting techniques, which is what we're going to talk about in just a second. But level setting here, the process as it is right now is not perfect. It might be the devil you know, but there are a lot of areas in here that are pain points and that can be improved upon with a good use of some of this nascent technology that is extraordinarily efficient at looking at content and helping drive new content based on what you fed it in the context. Okay, what's the problem? The problem that we're looking at is you have presumably large repositories of information. You've responded to dozens or hundreds of RFIs, RFPs. Maybe you've written white papers. You have capability statements. That is your institutional knowledge, and it is locked up in a SharePoint or in a shared drive, or quite often in the brains of 2 or 3 people at your company that just know where things are. They know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. Proposal development is expensive and time consuming when you have ready access to the documents that are in your library. How do you leverage that? That is your IP. That is a asset to more quickly get to a good pink team draft and ideally be able to respond to more drafts and more opportunities. One of the things that one of the quotes that I like to recall is Mark Twain said, "History doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes." And I like to think that, except recompetes notwithstanding, the opportunities don't repeat themselves, they rhyme. So they might be just a little bit off from something that you've written about in the past. And it's a lot easier to have something like AI help adjust that past content to fit the new opportunity than to manually go through and make those edits yourself on a first draft. Okay, AI is the new way. AI is not new. It is the product of decades of build and compute breakthroughs. Artificial intelligence in the computing context was coined in the 1950s. We had 30 years of computers being able to store and process information, but they couldn't find patterns. Kind of like having information in a filing cabinet, but you didn't know quite where it was. Then we had big breakthroughs in the last quarter century. You had the deep learning breakthroughs, which allowed computers to identify complex patterns in data. This is like teaching a computer to recognize that a certain word combinations might mean specific things, but it still couldn't create new content. And then really in the 2010s, you had embeddings, which allowed computers to understand the relationships that words had. So the difference between knowing that bank referred to a depository institution as opposed to a riverbank based on the words around it and the context that it was framed in. And then the real breakthrough was in 2017 when Google released its transformer architecture that really formed the basis of the GPTs that we use today, the chatbots that you've interacted with in the commercial settings. With regard to proposal development, if your process is manual in doing these things, the technology that's available right now can make that more efficient. You just have to figure out how to get the most out of it in a way that protects your sensitive and proprietary information. Okay, what are the things that we hear most often? I like AI, but what are the usage roadblocks? The outputs are too bland and generic. Sometimes you are looking for a degree of specificity in a particular RFP response or your content that if you put it into one of the big large language models like OpenAI's ChatGPT or Google's Gemini, you're just not going to be able to get as specific as you need to. Prompting can get you closer, but remember, these models are trained on the entirety of the data contained in the internet. So being able to find a very specific piece and be very proficient at it, there are limitations on that. That's where, something like what we do or what the other players in our space do is build a domain-specific repository to help with that. But prompting techniques can get you a little bit better on that bland and generic piece. The other thing, it takes too long going back and forth to get something good. If this is the trade-off that you might need to make an assessment on. Figure out what time you're spending on the process, and then quite literally measure how long it takes when you use AI, especially after you get better at the prompting techniques to get something good. You can be more efficient at how you use AI to get more out of it. And then the last piece, it's not customized to my company's past performance experience. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, some of the big tools out there offer something, Claude calls it projects, ChatGPT calls it projects, I think Gemini calls it gems, where you can upload a handful of documents to inform a chat that you're having with that chatbot. And those are useful because you don't have to copy and paste into the context window or into the dialog box that you're chatting with. It can reference those. The downside here is that it's limited, right? You might be able to upload 5, 10, 20 documents, but if you have a large repository of information, you want the AI to be able to trawl, ingest, and then synthesize. It's going to be a little tougher to do it, but it is a step above just using the chatbot. Okay, let's get to the misconception that AI will replace us. I get this one all the time. We run a demo and the proposal lead on the customer side will say, this is amazing. There goes my job. This is a very powerful technology. Try to ignore some of the headline commentary about artificial general intelligence. And, we're a long way from Skynet. If you've been following along with the kind of the practical application here. When new technology comes out that makes us more efficient, I've yet to see the example where we get a time dividend back, where somebody says, oh, it only took you 2 hours and it should have taken you 10. Enjoy the rest of the day off. What we're seeing is the competitive pressures mean that if you can do 5 times as many proposals in the amount of time it used to take you to do one, well, you're going to go after 5 times as many opportunities. And we're really seeing that. And I think the folks on the VI side may be able to corroborate that we're seeing an increase in the number of responses to solicitations. And that it hasn't been borne out, but I think is very likely because more folks are using technology like generative artificial intelligence to get to those responses more quickly. The punchline here is that humans are still needed, and you need to be what they call in the AI parlance in the loop, the human in the loop, to be able to curate what you're putting in, how you're asking the question, and vetting the output that the model gives you. And when you get good at that, then you can really find those time savings. And hopefully that means that, look, you're not spending time on a lower value task like going through a library and finding the right passages. You're spending that time adding your expertise to what you're starting with, which is a good first draft, and then building from that point forward. Okay, what does AI do well? Here are a few different pieces of the proposal development process: solicitation shred, outline, shall statements, compliance matrix, past performance, etc. It does all of these well discreetly. What it doesn't do well is when you ask for all of these at the same time. If you take only a few things away from this presentation, please take this away. Be very modular when you are interrogating an AI chatbot. It is good if you give it a very narrow focus at any given time. If you try to do too much with it, then it is going to struggle. One of the other things that you might run into when you're using one of the conversational chatbots is a limit to the context window. So if you've been in ChatGPT or you've been in Claude or Gemini and it says this chat is getting long, you might want to start a new chat. What it's telling you is that the context window that you have to query the platform in that session is running up against its limit. Because it is expensive to run these queries, these platforms generally limit the amount of questions and answers and content you can put in there. Really, these are words. Tokens are a proxy for word count. It's about 25% more than the word count. So if you were to upload a 200-page RFP, that would be about 150,000 tokens. And you might be able to get 10 back and forth exchanges off of that after you've uploaded that. Claude, I think, has a 200,000 token limit. Gemini is much higher. Depends on which package you have, and something like OpenAI that will allow that to flex. But again, one of the limitations is, you probably have a lot of questions that you want to ask about an RFP that you're responding to and how you want that information formatted. It's usually going to be longer than just 10 questions. So you would have to open a new window on that. That can be a little bit cumbersome versus some of the other more tailored tools that you can get around those limitations. And also, the last thing I'll say about this is when you run really long in a conversation and you're starting to run up against that limit on a context window, that's when you're more likely to see those hallucinations, which are talked about quite a bit, where the AI starts to really stretch, maybe make something up as it's running out of its working memory to be able to generate accurate responses. Okay, what are some of the limitations that we, at this point in the foundational technology, that AI is not getting to just yet? Recruiting the right personnel. This is still a relationship-based business in so many ways, and making those connections is incumbent on the human being. Customer intimacy with RFIs, recompetes, RFP drafts, etc. Some of this you can help with. You can put email conversations and others to inform AI. But really, I mean, this is based on conversations you've had with the program officer, the contracting officer, to get that information. Negotiating award terms. This speaks to a broader limitation. If you have experience putting an Excel file, for example, into one of the chatbots, you have very likely run into some frustrations with its ability to analyze and accurately represent the data that you've put in there and how you can withdraw certain pieces of that into an analysis. It is better with words than it is with numbers at this point. And so if it's the reason why I haven't seen a tool out there that is good at using AI for a pricing engine, for example. We just don't think that foundational technology is quite there yet. So negotiating award terms, putting together discrete pricing, that's something that's still the purview of the human expert. Coordinating with SMEs and project managers, program managers, that is, that's going to fall on you. And then teaming arrangements. This is really improving right now. And so I think this is an area to watch where AI is going to be able to look more cleanly across different capability areas and where there might be gaps in your capabilities that might be filled by a potential teaming partner. But right now, that's still a more manual human-based process. Okay. What's the recipe to get better output? To use AI more effectively, you either need to improve the AI or you need to improve your techniques for using the AI. This is a better ingredients, better pizza sort of a ad line. To improve the AI, look, we're in the economics parlance, we're all price takers. We are users of the foundational technology. Unless you are fine-tuning your own models, which, hey, there's open source models that you can pull down and do that work, but most of us are going to leverage what's out there. These models are improving at a startling pace. When ChatGPT came out in 2022 in a public way, it was a kind of it was fast, but it was a kind of a single track response. You entered something into it and it very quickly spit out a response that was based on the relationship of the words that you had put into the query. In the last 9 months or a year, you've had the introduction of reasoning models, and those are, you might notice, are a little bit slower than maybe some of the older versions that you used, but they are good at breaking down the question into component parts and more accurately going through the process of answering those. So AI, yes, it's improving, but we're a little bit at the mercy of the major providers of those foundational models. They take hundreds of millions of dollars to train and develop. So we can improve our techniques for using AI, and let's talk about that. Okay. So how do you go from generic and bland prompts to something that's more tailored? Here's an example of a very generic prompt. This is an OpenAI screen grab. Please write a technical approach to endpoint security management. It has absolutely no context. It could answer that in 1,000 different ways. It has no idea how you want to answer it or the opportunity you're going after or anything else. Will it generate something? Absolutely it will. Will that be in any way tailored to what you're trying to do? Probably not. If you're just trying to get a description of a fairly commoditized process in the market, great, that question's fine, but you're not going to get much unique content. Basic prompting. Okay, let's set the context. Context is key. That context window, I talked about it. It has some limitations, but you have a lot of flexibility with 200,000 tokens or 1 million tokens to be able to give it more information. What is the agency you're responding to? It has information in its training data around different agencies. So even just giving it the name of the agency might help it reference relevant information. What's the specific problem statement that you're trying to solve? What are the objectives of the project? You need to give it more rather than less. And because of the introduction of these reasoning models, you can put quite a bit into the query and it will be able to parse those out and incorporate each of those elements discreetly. So introducing context. Start with a brief overview of the project's background. What is the agency it's for? What are those agencies' goals? If you have those, you can put those in bullet form. And then ask it a question, draft an executive summary for a proposal addressing the Department of Energy's need for renewable energy integration solutions. That's at least a better start. It is still very light in terms of context, but you can see it's a lot better than the bulleted question that we looked at on the previous slide. Be explicit. If you have a goal to get a detailed project management plan, the objective should be to give it good information about it, how to answer that. So a good prompt for that might be generate a project management plan outline that includes timelines, milestones, and risk management strategies for a cybersecurity upgrade project for the Department of Defense. Okay, we have agency, we have a couple of key framing goals outlined, and then what is the ultimate deliverable of project management plan? What you want to do is write about our team's qualifications. unless you've uploaded a good amount of context on what those qualifications are, then it's not going to know what to do. But if you give it a little bit more context, it should be able to better map to that question. What I see a lot of times with folks that are in using a chatbot interface for the first time is they see asking a question a lot like doing a control F function, and they'll say project management plan. And that's, you want to use the search box, the query box, with what they call natural language queries. So the way you would ask another human being, that's how you want to ask the AI. I would treat the AI chatbot as an analyst, and you're asking that analyst to go do something. Okay, what are some of the keys to desired output? Format, tone, and length are all key. You can't assume that the AI model is going to default to the tone tenor of a certain tone tenor for RFP responses. These are technical. These conversational AI engines are trained on, like I said, vast quantities of data. They are predisposed by design to be very chippy and positive. And a lot of times they'll use a whole lot of adverbs. And I think we all know that you probably don't want to overdo the adverbs in the response to a federal solicitation. So you might need to give it specific instructions in terms of how you want to set the tone for that. And then on the formatting piece, these are multimodal models. They can generate tables, figures. Figures I find a little bit wanting at this point, but tables are absolutely within scope. Tell it, I want it to create a table. I want the lefternmost column to be this. I want the second column to be this. I want the third and fourth to be this and this. And then give it that context. It has the ability to ingest all of that and then output it in that format. And then length dictates depth. Government proposals often have strict page limits or word counts. When you are responding or you're interrogating an AI chatbot, and you are trying to build out a response to a section that says, only 10 pages or whatever it may be, you're going to have to find a way to give some instruction to the AI in terms of how long it should be. If you've been in one of these chatbot interfaces, they don't output in page numbers, they output in paragraphs or word count. So you might have to find a proxy for page count, say no more than 200 words. Or what you'll probably notice is the paragraph length tends to be a little bit uniform. So you could say, hey, give me 6 to 8 paragraphs in response to this directive, this query. And then the last thing I'll say here is kind of a funny one. I read an article that millions of dollars in cost are revenue that customers are paying are going to processing please and thank you and the sort of nice formalities that we might use in a social setting that are being queried of the AI. You don't need to do that. You can be very direct with these chatbots. Okay, advanced prompting. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Here are a few principles to keep in mind. Zero shot versus few shot. Give it some past examples. If you have past examples to put in there, even if they're truncated or summarized, that's going to produce the best results. You could even do this in a couple of different windows because, like I said, there is a context window limit to how you're interacting with that one session. So you might have a session where you put in an example in more built out and then say, I want this summarized into a smaller, 500 word summary, and then copy that, put that into another window that you have with that chatbot. Do that 2 or 3 times with different documents and then say, here are 3 past examples of my past performances. Reference these when you're building out the response to this new directive for describing my past performance. Chain of thought. You have to be very prescriptive with these. You might want to say, think step by step, or adopt the approach of the scientific method, or whatever you want to do so that it has instructions for how to go through the process of querying this data. Persona-based. I like to tell the AI at the beginning, you are a senior proposal writer with 20 years of experience. responding to DoD related opportunities, and you are drafting to a pink team specification for this opportunity. There you go. So it has a reference for how proposal writers should write, and there you've given it to stand in with those qualities. Provide context and retrieval augmented generation. Okay, this is very similar to A, zero shot versus few shot. If you've heard about retrieval augmented generation, or RAG, it is a AI framework for being able to query large databases that are outside the context window. So the window that you're in when you're in ChatGPT, that's your context window. A RAG architecture has a vector database that will leave that, reference a repository of information with multiple files, search through those, and be able to pull that information in. This is outside the context of these commercially available chatbots by and large, but you may run into that with other tools that you explore. But you might have to give it context around, in your response, please only reference our company and the agency we are proposing to. This might be especially relevant if you have teaming arrangements and some of that information is in a file that you uploaded. And then context window optimization, you might need to tell it up front. Sometimes these questions can get so long you get lost in your own question. Because the context window is the entire chat that you're having, not just the box that you're inputting your question into, you can be very deliberate and structured in how you go about it. So you might say, here are 5 examples of my past performance. When I input this, just say okay. You don't want the AI to give you, oh, it's a really nice past performance. I see where you did all this. Just say okay, because then it will retain that information when you ask it the real punchline question of, now I need you to execute XYZ. So let's get into an example. How do we write prompts that produce the best results? So we've highlighted a couple things here. Hopefully it's a little blurry on my screen. Hopefully it's not too blurry on yours. But okay, beginning of this query. This is all one query. Act as an experienced proposal writer for Company X. Your goal is to develop a compliance strategy for our firm to respond to, and then title the RFP task title so you can more easily reference back to it, and write a high-scoring draft of section, whatever it might be, for our proposal for this agency in this title. First, this is a step-by-step. First, consider our firm's strength and our past performance. Then think step-by-step on how to structure them to meet the PWS tasks and address the evaluation criteria directly. Then ideate separately from the perspective of a solution architect who is deeply experienced in, and then give it the field name, and enhance your response by integrating these elements into the response. Now you're going to give it some formatting and tone and style direction. Your response must be concise. Do not use flowery language. Prioritize providing specific examples. Then below that, you might itemize what several of those discrete items are that you reference above, or that you might reference subsequently, so that it has an easy, won't call it glossary, but mapping across terms and how you're going to refer to them. Because you might not want to describe the PWS task every time you put it into a question in this context window. Hopefully that's helpful. That's a really good example of a very thorough single prompt. You could also break this into 4 different prompts that stack and are retained in the metadata of that chat window. Okay, let's look at an exercise. Which prompt is best? We have 3 different options here. Hopefully this is pretty straightforward. Option 1, develop a table that aligns each RFP requirement with the corresponding section in our proposal, noting any areas that are not addressed. Prompt 2, create a list matching RFP requirements to our proposal sections. And prompt 3, analyze the attached RFP and our proposal draft, create a compliance matrix listing each RFP requirement, the corresponding proposal section it is addressed in, and page number, and note any gaps with suggestions for improvement. If you think that that last one is too much, especially now that we have reasoning models as the default setting for these chatbots, it's not. It is looking through each piece of that. It is dissecting it. It is breaking it into separate sections. So the third one is definitely the best one to leverage there. Okay, another exercise, project management. The first option, generate a project management plan for a cybersecurity upgrade project. Include timelines. Pretty light. Number two, generate a project management plan outline that includes timelines, milestones, and risk management strategies for a cybersecurity upgrade project for the Department of Defense. We've given the AI a couple of different pieces to reference in this. So we've given it some structure, we've given it a domain area cybersecurity upgrade, and we've given it a customer, Department of Defense. And then third one, generate a management plan that includes timelines and requirements for a cybersecurity upgrade project. 1 and 3 are pretty similar. Hopefully you drew from this that this second one is the best one of the 3. Okay. That's the gist of it for the prompting techniques. Just to put a finer point on it, this is really not rocket science. And the more you use these chatbots, or if you have a domain specific tool using that, you'll figure out pretty quickly what works and doesn't work. But sometimes it goes against intuition to ask too much, because if you're asking another human being a question, you're probably not going to ask it to do 15 different things at the same time. And here, that's what it's designed to do. You need to give it all of this additional context. You need to give it information about who you are and what your experience is, so that it can draw from that in responding to that. The other thing to keep in mind is AI is not, where it is now, and who knows where it's going to go. It's a brave new world, but it's not a one and done. It is an iterative process. If when we had it a few slides back that it takes too long to continue to go back and forth with the AI, you can get to a better place with how you are querying your data and asking questions, but you're probably going to need to iterate on it. And hopefully, if you go back to the beginning of the presentation where we talked about how long it takes you to get through this process, if you're iterating with a chatbot and it takes you a few hours, is that a good value add relative to some multiple of that, doing it a more manual process? And user experience may vary on that. This is not AI as a panacea. It's going to fix all your problems. But if you bring it in a targeted way, it's some of the areas that we talked about where it's good at. Could it make your process a little bit easier and help your business maybe move past some more manual functions into a little bit more of an automation and an efficiency approach? Let's talk about security for just a minute, because I think this is top of mind for a lot of you. It's the first question I get asked about: how is my data safe? Is my data safe in your platform or in a conversational major AI chatbot? Both with regard to your proprietary data that you are copying and pasting into a third-party application, like some of the ones that are shown on this page. That should feel a little bit weird. And if it doesn't, then maybe your proprietary data isn't what you think it's cracked up to be. You want to be protective about that. You don't want to get audited as a part of one of these contracts and find that you have put sensitive information into a domain or to a third party that is not authorized to handle it. And what I would say as an overarching rule is you should be very sparing with proprietary information that you put into one of these chatbots. And yes, there's a trade-off with detail and comprehensiveness, because if you can't put a lot of context into it about your company, it's not going to be able to speak with any authority to what your company does. With the free plans that are available, on these, that is especially true. They generally allow training on user data. There are some ways to disable it, offerer to offerer, but generally speaking, what you put in there is fair game for them to use to improve future versions of that model. From enterprise plans, it's a little bit different, and you really have to look at the terms and conditions around whatever enterprise plan you've engaged with on that. Those typically exclude training and offer a shorter retention period of the data for security purposes. But again, case by case, you really need to kick the tires and understand what's happening to your data. And then your consumer paid plans, it's going to be mixed. It's going to exclude training. Some will require a manual opt-out. But maybe I could spend just a second on best practices for sensitive data. If you are going to use these chatbots in a more professional context around this, use the enterprise or API plans rather than consumer versions. Those generally offer 0 data retention in them, and you might need to specify that, but that's typically an option. You want to avoid uploading proprietary sensitive information in the free plans. I mentioned that. You might need to manually delete conversations immediately after use so that immediately leaves the platform and they can't retain that for future use. And then one other workaround is think about using an incognito or a temporary chat mode. Some of these have that as a standard offering so that it is never retained in the first place. The downside is you don't get access to past chats, which sometimes can be helpful if you're going back to see, yeah, I worked on that technical volume last week and it was in a chat. I want to go back and reference it. If you have to go back and reference it, it still exists in in the platform. And with that, I will pause and jump into Q&A.
Thank you to our presenter, Mr. Sasha Jackson, Senior Solutions Specialist, Uninet Proposal AI, for a very informative presentation and discussion. As a reminder, all attendees will receive a copy of the presentation along with a link to review the recording within 48 hours following today's session. We will now welcome back our panelists as we move to Q&A. Please only use the Q&A panel to type your questions, and we will respond to as many as possible. Mr. Jackson, we will begin with our first question from Lauren Zimmer. Lauren asks, what is solicitation shred?
Yeah, so when I talk about a solicitation shred, it's how are you mapping across sections CL and M? You want to understand what are the requirements for responding to this, what are the submission instructions, and how will this be evaluated? A lot of times the shred informs the first part of a compliance matrix where you're going to list out all of the different items that you must be compliant with and responding to that opportunity. And it's one of the things that in AI, and especially a fine-tuned AI, kind of like the one that we or some of our peers have developed, it will read through the entirety of that solicitation, and then based on that fine-tuning and training data, we can automatically map to those requirements, instructions, and evaluation criteria.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question is from Mike Ruggio. Mike asks, how much detail is too much when prompting AI?
Yeah, great question, Mike. There's not a pet answer on that. I would say that if you've gotten lost in your own question, that might be too much information. I would experiment with breaking it up and then adding context to it until you feel like you're starting to get a diminished answer. It's really more about your experience with it than the AI, because the AI is very good at doing multi-stage reasoning at this point with the foundational large language models that underpin these chatbots. So it's really more about how you want to interface with it than what the system can handle, because it can handle quite a bit. If you wanted to put 150,000 words into a single window, it could accommodate that, but you'd get lost in it.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question is from Mr. Mike Smith. Mr. Smith asks, Will federal agencies limit how much, for example, 20 to 30% of a proposal response can be AI supported / written?
A better question for your contracting officers to answer. We do get asked a lot. You know, I've been said customers will say I've been told that anything that's using AI will be rejected. I think NASA came out with something like that a number of months ago about anything that was going to be responded with the aid of AI. I don't think that there's a general rule. I will take the tenor from the top of the administration in terms of a real interest in bringing AI and additional competition into the government contracting space. If somebody asks you, did you use AI to help with this? We always recommend being transparent and honest. And you know, the way it works with our product is you are using your own content to then build to a draft response. That is not the final response. It is a draft response that you are then going to continue to modify and tweak before you submit it. And I think that, you know, with adoption growing the way it is in this space, it would be very difficult to mandate that contracting firms don't use a tool that can make them more efficient and deliver ultimately a better price to the taxpayer.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much. Our next question is from Pedro. Pedro asks, I heard that federal agencies are increasingly concerned about proposals submitted using AI. Is it true?
Yeah, I mean, that's to the response I just gave. I think it's agency to agency and you know, even at subdivisions within that. I do think that some of this is a lack of awareness and a concern with maybe an increase in the submission rates. We have seen that and heard that from a lot of people in this space, which is a sign to us that, you know, this AI adoption is really increasing. I think what those agencies are guarding against, and I'm on the vendor side, I'm not on the agency side, so you know, transparent there. They're guarding against people that put this through ChatGPT, one shot, send it off, and it reads like a third grader wrote it. Has nothing that is of value, but the you know, contracting office still has to go through and review it and rate it. Don't do that, and you can still leverage this in a more modular fashion to help you, but not have it write it completely for you. Hopefully that's helpful.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question is from Paula Moon. Paula Moon, PhD, asks, which AI tools specifically do you recommend for VA proposals besides Gemini, ChatGPT, ...
Yeah, I'm not going to make a recommendation on which chatbot to use. They offer different trade-offs. I would encourage you to do a little research around that. Use one of the chatbots to interrogate around what your specific requirements are and have it provide some pros and cons of each. You know, Anthropic has a smaller context window, but might be a little bit faster. Gemini is going to have a bigger context window, but it really depends on the use case. I don't think any of them are going to be specific to a single agency versus another.
Thank you. Our next question is from Skip Graham. Skip asks, for responses to some state RFQs, California, for example, you have to designate if AI was used to help you develop your response to the RFQ. Do you think the federal space will follow suit? And if so, how will that affect the review of future submissions?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're all curious about how that's going to develop with the pace of adoption that we're seeing on the GovCon side of AI technologies to help really not just with the proposal piece, but with the business development piece and you know, other aspects of the procurement cycle. I think it's going to be very hard for a government that is ostensibly leaning into artificial intelligence to then say to its customers or its vendors, its suppliers, that you're not allowed to use it. I can't give you advice on how you respond to something like State of California's like I said, we encourage folks to be transparent, and we think that the government side is going to catch up with the growing use on the commercial side.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question is from Kenan Artis. Kenan asks, do you have to upload past performance for each solicitation to which you're responding, or will the chatbot retain it?
So it's only going to retain what's in the window that you're in. Maybe if you have an enterprise plan or a higher tier, there might be a way to unlock some past chats. I'm not 100% familiar there, but generally speaking, you open a browser window and it's chatgpt.com or whatever one you're using. And you have a dialog box that pops up and you ask questions back and forth until you hit your context window. That is where you would want to include that past performance, because you're going to want to have something for it to reference when you're writing out a new past performance response section. And that's to my earlier point. Consider using a projects feature at some of these where you can just upload the documents as opposed to copying and pasting all of that into the context window. But you are limited by just what's in that window at that time. When you open another window, it can't go back and reference the other one.
Thank you. Our next question, it's a little long, is from Tara Davis. Tara asks, for those who are reviewing contracts that may be showing increased AI qualities, text/copy, is this impacting likelihood of award? Example, X company proposal is showing that it was generated 80% by AI versus Z company is showing that it was generated 50% by AI. Is this being factored into awards? Does company X have disadvantage or advantage in winning compared to company Z?
Great question. I don't have the information to answer that. I don't think AI is anywhere close to being 80-90% of an award, maybe just in the framing of the question. The best way to use it. It's also going to be very hard to put a good number on that, because for example, in our platform, you are using AI at every step from the shred to solutioning to outline generation to iterating on a draft. There's no way to say this was 40% or 60% or 70%. It's just integrated into the tool. So I think that's going to be hard to suss out, and I'm curious to see how the contracting side or the government side will adjudicate that.
Very interesting. Thank you. Our next question is from Judith Brodnicki. Judith asks, how do we ensure our company information is secure when we upload examples for the AI to emulate?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're using a commercially available AI, one of the larger chatbots that are out there, you are making a trade-off when you upload your content in there. You are putting a lot of faith that they are not going to use that to train their models. Now, for the enterprise plans and the paid plans, and chatbot by chatbot has different requirements, as I spoke to on the security side, for retaining that. I'm not saying they're all using that data and stealing your proprietary info, but you're putting a lot of faith when you put it in there that it's not going to be used for some of those purposes. So if I'm in your shoes, I'm being very cautious about uploading anything that might be if you can go too proprietary, right? Because everything you write is proprietary, but there are certain things that are maybe more proprietary than others in terms of you wouldn't want that used for training purposes.
Wonderful, thank you. We have time for 2 more questions. Our next question is from Scott Lawler. Scott asks, are some platforms better than others for proposal work?
Great question. I don't use any of the main chatbots because we have a tailored domain specific one. So I think ours is great. But try them, experiment with them. Each of these chatbots sits on top of a foundational large language model. And as with any of them, you can change which foundational model you're using. You're going to have to experiment to see which one works the best. They're all fine-tuned a little bit differently to produce certain types of content or structure a certain way. So this is one where user experience is going to dictate which one works better for your situation.
Wonderful, thank you. Our next question is from Alex. Alex Morrison. Alex asks, related to AI question from Feds, is Proposal AI thinking about integrating humanizer tools? If not, in addition, do you recommend using a third-party humanizer after content is AI generated?
So maybe I don't completely understand the question, but are you talking about human reinforcement training so that well, I know you can't answer it. So there's a couple different ways. A lot of these big AI models have been fine-tuned with human reinforcement. So they feed answers to human beings. Human beings select which one's best. They feed that back into the AI model, and that informs how it is, the parameters, how it outputs information. Because the human is so ingrained in the loop, the proposal expert in our process, we don't really need a lot of recursive behavior to feed back into the model, because the individual is already in it at every step. It is effectively reinforcing it as you use it.
Very, very nice. Wonderful. Thank you to our attendees and panel for such an engaging question and answer segment. Thank you to our presenter, Mr. Sasha Jackson, Senior Solution Specialist, Uninet Proposal AI, for a very informative presentation and discussion. As a reminder, after today's event, we ask that you please complete a brief survey evaluating today's session. We also encourage you to continue to visit the VA OSDBU events page for upcoming programs that may be of interest to you and your network at www.vetbiz.va.gov/events. To everyone who has joined today's session, thank you. On behalf of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, and the Strategic Outreach and Communications Program, please note, participation of any commercial entities in VA outreach and training programs does not convey or imply that the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs directly or indirectly endorses any product or service provided or to be provided by the commercial entity, its successors, assignees, or licensees. Furthermore, the Department of Veterans Affairs does not warrant any services that may be provided by the commercial organizations listed. This now concludes today's session.